Hello there, and welcome back to the channel. I am your host Maria Legier, reading this on a Saturday following a night of pure debauchery. I am hungover. As fuck. This is Rebellion. We can get it for you wholesale. When I was 12 years old, I received my first ever punk rock record as a gift from my father. The record in question was Never Mind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols. A record that is now legendary in both reverence and ridicule. Loved and honoured by punk puritan snobs and self-important music historians of the same snobbishness, just about as much as it is loathed and lambasted by punk puritan snobs and self-important music historians of the same snobbishness. I think it would be safe to say, with no exaggerations, that this record completely changed my life. It was that raw energy and anger, the blaring guitars and pure piss and vinegar speaking directly to my dormant yet slowly awakening teenage rebellion from 30-something years before my time. It was an absolutely amazing epiphany for me at the time. Pure rebellion roaring, screaming and snarling at me. Forced out of my very poor and tinny speakers that did nothing but add one more layer of anti-musicianship to the severe lack of musical talent on display within their rotten ranks and vicious vulgarity. It was pure bliss, and I had never heard anything like that before. To this day, I still own that CD, and a first pressing on LP and on cassette. I would have gotten the 8-track as well were it not ridiculously expensive last time I checked. Probably sounds odd that I had never heard anything like that before, considering that I was born in the 80s and grew up in the 90s. The decade of heroin, cynicism and grunge that saw punk rock become a mainstream pop phenomenon, with all the corporate-sponsored pseudo-rebellion a boy could eat, telling kids that it is quite alright to rebel as long as you do it within the hours of 5 PM and 10 PM, and only then in a manner acceptable to your parents and your corporate overlords. And only if you wear the clothes associated with this particular brand of rebellion, bought from these selected stores, trademarked, that are the only accepted purveyors of edgy teen angst and melodramatic middle finger t-shirts aimed squarely at the establishment. That is, the very same establishment whose clothes of overpriced wholesale edginess generates a vast amount of money for them. And only them. Now, there is a very simple reason for me not hearing anything like it prior to this record falling into my pimpled pubescent lap and waxy sweaty ears. No satellite TV, no cable TV, no MTV and no internet, and a distaste bordering on the manic for radio transmission, for some strange reason. As a matter of fact, I did not get a stable internet connection until I was about 25 years of age, for reasons of me moving from one cheap and shitty bedsit or apartment to the next in my wandering and rambling student years, where I did my best to get myself an edumacation, only to drop out and become the splendidly bearded pseudo-hermit you now hear or read before you, muttering something into your ears or eyes about these goddamned kids of today and their fancy new genders, music and interwebs. Whilst I'm still clinging to all the artistic ambition and illusions of literary talent I had back when I got that record in the first place. Ah, memories, nostalgia and grumpiness. The do-it-yourself aspect of punk rock was promptly forgotten in this era of heroin-infused cynicism or bubblegum pop naivety, leading us down the path upon which we now tread, I suspect, where the concept of rebellion is bottled and sold wholesale and in bulk to young men and women with more disposable money than sense, and more wretched solipsist self-aggrandizement than the ability for introspection and self-awareness, or doing anything themselves for that matter. Selling, buying and shouting slogans is all well and good, I suppose, if one have no arguments beyond the slogans shouted as supposed shutdowns of severe and sanctimonious magnitude. It looks good on camera and on social media to oppose this and oppose that, to oppose the high and mighty establishment from deep within the claws and clammy hands of the establishment, saying in a voice that is echoed by one and all, including the political and corporate establishment, which is more or less the same thing in this honky-tonk timeline of ours, that I oppose the establishment, brave rebel without a cause that I am. The establishment, of course, being the patriarchy, the curiarchy, that foul and terrible nest of pale, male and stale, cigar-chomping, man-spreading and mansplaining oppressors these bought and sold by the pound rebels against other people's God-given right to have opinions imagined in their mind's eye. These foul oppressors that have made the Western world so wretched to live in that they not only have the freedom to protest an invisible and made-up enemy, but also have the disposable income to buy all manner of edgy clothes and hair dyes to really showcase their rebellious nature. And of course being able to pay for the internet as well as the overpriced Apple products they use to bitch and complain in their witch hunt ways on well-established social media like the pawns of the establishment that they are, bought in bulk from corporations and celebrated by established flingers of shit laws and piss-pot hate speech introductions, feeding the beast that sees fit to limit our ability to express ourselves and thusly our ability to rebel. Now ain't that something to consider? These newly fanged and founded rebels of our day and age are rebelling against freedom and liberty. Against the right of other people to speak their mind and state their opinions. Whichever hate these rebellious rodents of corporate glee and establishment splendor wish to spew, they should be free to do so. Hate speech is only ever something that comes from other people, and social justice is something that only happens to other people. There is no hate speech in their throats and periodontitis mouths. For some groups must be protected above other groups. For equality and equity, don't you know? And the groups that are not protected from speech which they may find offensive are the privileged groups, by popular decree and governmentally sanctioned fear and loathing. Whereas those groups that have special laws in place to protect them from speech which they may not like are not privileged, despite having private laws being more or less the definition of privilege. But let's not get into that, shall we? This is the current year, and my sources tell me that reason and objectivity has no place here. Nor, it would seem, is there place in the current timeline for people being treated equally under the law. That would be oppressive, you know. You see, ye ought well to have learned by now. Now check your privilege and fuck off. Social justice and the oppression Olympics have come to mean that a feminist stating that all men are rapist scum that should be killed as a preventative measure, reduced to and maintained at about 10% of the population, is not hate speech. Should one, however, add the word black in front of men in the sentence above, one has a problem on one's hands. For that, dear misogynist mansplaining friends, is hate speech. Or a social justice warrior urchin of pompous arrogance and aristocratic allegiance may state quite blatantly that white men is the greatest problem this world has ever seen, the cause of all the terror and the trembles and the nausea he or she or xi or xim may feel whenever their bigoted eyes fall upon the lack of pigmentation on his foul rapist face, labeling them all bigots and racist and sexist scum, seeing no hypocrisy in Xur's grandiose statement. And this is not considered hate speech by this den of thieves and liars. Worrying about Islamic terrorism, however, is deemed hate speech by the terrible forces that be trembling at their knees at anything opposing their chosen narrative and chosen hero of the hour. That hero being whomsoever this establishment financed and sanctioned rebels against the state and the establishment and the state of the establishment have decided is the most major of minorities currently crawling through the sludge of our sewer system societies. The oppression Olympics is in full fucking swing. There is currency in perceived oppression, and those who dabble in the black magic arts of the oppression Olympics are fully aware of this, using this currency for all they can in order to gain power over both society and those whom they consider their enemies, winning the war and gaining ground by shame and ridicule instead of reasoned arguments. For opposing hate speech laws and the infantile reasoning behind it on grounds of liberty and freedom and justice for all must necessarily mean hating those who currently reside at the top of the oppression totem pole. Otherwise, one would not object to rules and laws and regulations regulating what people may say and, by extension, what opinions people are allowed to hold. Any society under whose rule one is not allowed to utter certain opinions. Any society under whose rule speech is dictated by governmental rule is not a free and open society. Opposing governmental limitations on speech on general principles of freedom and liberty for all does not mean anything but wanting people to be free to speak their mind, whomsoever these people may be and whatsoever they may hold as their opinion. And this wish for absolute freedom of speech is one I hold as one of my core values. That each and every one should be free to say and to speak and express whatever they so wish and desire, no matter if I myself agree completely or disagree vehemently with what is said and expressed. For that, my dear children of the post-2012 apocalypse, would be treating everyone equally. Extending everyone the right to speak, the possibility to have their speech challenged, and to hold whatever fucking opinion they hold, regardless of skin color, political belief, religious belief, or lack thereof, regardless of sex and gender and other arbitrary factors that have become the go-to defining aspect of one's life in this preposterous auto-cannibalistic holographic image of reality we inhabit, is treating people equally. Generating laws and regulations designed to protect certain groups of people does nothing but elevate these certain groups of people above the plebs and peasants, to treat them as some manner of unerring aristocracy which one must never contradict or ridicule, whose statements, however faulty, may never be challenged for fear of punishment by the state. This cannot, under any circumstance, be regarded as people being treated equally under the law. For people to be treated equally under the law would mean no special protection under the law for those groups of people whom we have decided, in our imagined kindness and inclusivity, are deserving of some manner of privilege and pampered protection under the grand and majestically swaying tits, inflamed ovaries, neutered balls and flaccid cocks of the governmental banhammer fantastic. In upside-down land, equality have come to mean treating some groups with special privilege and others without. For we have been lulled into sleep and hypnotized by ideologues who tricked us into believing that certain groups have always been privileged, and so, to balance the scales, other groups must receive the same amount of privilege they imagine these other groups have. And this must be written into law. If no law exists to protect your group, you are by definition privileged, as opposed to those who are privileged enough to have private laws guaranteeing their special protection for being a precious and more worthy segment of the human population than you and your group. These are strange and mysterious times, dangerous and damaging. If our societies carry on with this downward spiral into censorship of speech and thusly of opinion, what once was beautiful will be completely lost. More so than we are at this point in time, when we are stuck with an entire generation that see no problems arising from limiting the rights of people to speak their mind, an entire generation that have been spoon-fed a certain kind of pseudo-rebellion that aims to imprison the mind instead of liberating it. For make no mistake, limiting what people are allowed to speak will also impact what and how people think. We will end up with a monoculture. That is, a culture in which all thought, behavior and speech is uniform, synthetic and mechanical, where each and every response to anything is pre-manufactured and doctored to be the correct response, lest one should fall foul of some nefarious wrongthink and be cast out and imprisoned. One would, if one was so inclined, not be completely amiss in thinking that the political establishment have no second thoughts in governing people's individual lives in minute detail. For they have willingly sought power, have they not? And anyone who willingly seeks power is, in the opinion of this majestically handsome juggler of words, one to be looked at with some severe suspicion. Where once rebellion sought freedom of expression, sought the liberation of the individual, to cast off the restraints of society such as they were, rebellion now seek to curtail expression, imprison the individual, and force new and fresh restraints in place to chain the individual to the collective, so that the individual is indistinguishable from the collective. Taking part in a certain subsection of society, that is, a community of like-minded people with the same interests aiming for a common goal, will be forgotten in place of identity politics that force one to take part in a collective based upon superficial traits instead of similarities of interests, or of thought, or of opinion. The cerebral have been replaced with the visceral, the psychological replaced with the physical, the freedom of the individual being forgotten and neglected for the safety of the collective, and that is safety only for some collectives, leaving only enmity and rage left for other collectives. Against this, one should and one must rebel, as long as one is able. Don't be told what you want, and don't be told what you need. There's no future, no future, no future for you. God save the Queen. Thank you very much for watching. Here follows an outro most befitting a video of this nature, a blatant attempt at virtual panhandling. Should you wish to support this channel, as well as my blog and any further endeavors this strange path will take me on, there are a few ways you can do that. The easiest would be to like, share and subscribe, as well as clicking the sometimes functional notification bell. Having the message, such as it is, manspread and mansplained far and wide will do wonders. You could also support my rambling and barely contained insanity by buying my books, which are linked below. More books will be made available as time allows. I also have a Redbubble shop, linked below, where you can buy prints in various forms of some of the artwork presented in my videos. Or you can contact me through the contact form on my blog for original artwork, commissions or prints direct from the source, so to speak. Until next time, I am your humble bearded bard, Morea Legier, manspreading majestically beneath the steel sky of doom.